The NFL Strategy Show, Thursday, October 24th, 2019. Dave Lochran, Sal Vetri, presented by Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports, where if you haven't done so yet, you should be going out and getting your $30 in Yahoo Sports rewards points. Up to $30 in YSRPs when you sign up and deposit at Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports. We'll throw it in there, the link in the YouTube chat, but if you want to do it now, go to awesemo.com. Click on the NFL tab, and upon doing so, you'll see the primetime article for tonight. Click that, totally free article. Read it, of course. It's a good one. EMAC does a phenomenal job. And click on the Yahoo link right there. Use the sign-up code AWESEMO, AWESEMO, when you sign up and get your $30 in YSRPs, which are as good as cash to play and win money on the site. Got the $250,000 NFL Baller coming up on Sunday. Basketball is underway. Some great NBA contests at Yahoo. And, you're not going up against the same level of sharks, the same amount of sharks as you would on sites like DraftKings and FanDuel. So use that sign-up code, sign up through the link, and get your YSRPs. That's Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports, sponsor the NFL Strategy Show. Sal Vetri, what's happening, man?
Yeah, what's going on, Luffy? Yeah, this is a nice slate. I looked at ownership for the first time earlier this morning, and I know that you guys covered that yesterday. And there's spots where, I'm not really with the field all that much, and I think I like that right now. So I'm excited to break this one down.
All right, let's jump into it, man. We got 12 games, and by the way, we've got the Showdown slate tonight, and Alex Baker, Ben Rasa are going to be discussing it with you right after this show. So make sure to stick around on youtube.com/awesemo. And these guys are going to get you set and ready for tonight's one-game Showdown slate. Man, by the way, just not to get off topic so soon, but I've been paying attention to like the top lineups in these showdowns. Dude, it's insane, Sal. You've got defense winning in the captain spot, or teams with defense in the captain spot winning, I think, in 3 of the last 5 showdowns, which is purely outrageous, but people are going to continue to do it because it continues to work. Very unfortunate, but that's the way it is. And you'll see like 500 people chop first place at points. These are crazy, crazy contests that they got running for these one gamers, even with, the ability to have a player in the captain spot and diversify or change it up a little bit. It's still insane.
Yeah, it is. And I honestly, I think Showdown's like the most popular format right now for NFL, even over like some of these main slates, just the amount of people that have interest in it. But yeah, I agree. And the pricing, I mean, this one tonight, this is the wildest showdown that I've seen in the NFL ever. You have a 13,000, a 12,000, and 11,000 player all in the same team, but I'm sure they'll break that down on that video after this.
Yes, they will. It's Alex Baker, Ben Rasa coming up directly after us. And of course, we've got our NBA content. The NBA Strategy Show already happened. That's a great one to get you prepared. A little foundational look at tonight's 3-game slate. And then I will be with Adam Scher for the deeper dive. And then you got Live Before Lock taking you up till 7 p.m. tip between the Detroit Pistons and the Atlanta Hawks. I wanted to say the Detroit Tigers and the Atlanta Falcons. Wouldn't even have had the sport right.
Yeah, I know. That's the exact swing of things that we're in with all 3 technically still going. The World Series still on.
Yeah, I can't believe Washington is doing what they're doing, man. It's a travesty, but hey, I guess they deserve one.
It's a travesty for Bryce Harper. But yeah, I mean, if you're, I don't know, maybe a Yankee fan or something, you just got a discount on Garrett Cole after last night? Maybe.
Yeah, it's possible. I think Bryce Harper rolling around in a bed of money isn't too distraught by it. But
that's also very fair. Yeah.
Who knows? All right, let's jump into it, man. We've got 12 games to cover here, starting with Atlanta and Seattle. First of all, the injury news, we will hit that as we get to each game instead of banging it out at the top of the show. It's a lot more streamlined when we do it that way. But Matt Ryan didn't participate in practice yesterday. We know he had a walking boot on after the Week 7 loss to the Rams, where he clearly had his worst game of the season. Mohamed Sanu is no longer in Atlanta. And this game, I want to see if it's still offline from a Vegas standpoint. If you looked and you already know, feel free to throw it out there. But
I haven't checked since the last time that I checked, it was off the books.
Yeah, last time I looked, it was
still is.
too. But It opened around 54. If Matt Ryan's out, it's going to come down. But really, just looking at this Seattle team, Russell Wilson in an extremely favorable spot. Tyler Lockett might not be getting 15 targets a game. He's not getting the same volume as your typical number one receiver, but he's been very efficient. He does get some looks in the red zone, and he's going up against a completely disastrous Atlanta secondary. You can make a similar argument for DK Metcalf. We'll talk about Carson, but how do you see this passing game first?
Yeah, so for the passing game for Seattle, it is honestly going to come down to Matt Ryan for me for how much interest. If Matt Ryan's in there, then I feel more confident that they have to kind of keep on with the passing. If it's not, it can turn into an ugly game and Chris Carson can dominate. So that's a big piece of it. But yeah, I mean, I like Tyler Lockett going to be in the slot against KZ. It's a good matchup for him. KZ so far this season, it has a 119.9 passer rating against. Tyler Lockett breaking down into some of the other receivers in the price range. He's actually kind of rising to the top as a guy that I had the most interest in. On the outside, whether Trufant is in or out, we'll see come these Thursday and Friday reports. But that person will most likely be whether it's a Kendall Sheffield because he's a little bit bigger, or if Trufant is back on DK Metcalf. Again, a positive matchup for Metcalf. So yeah, if you want to stack Seattle, I think it's okay. I think there's better spots to go on the slate. Obviously, the matchup's really good. But if you're going to be paying up, I think I prefer, and we'll get to them, Houston a little bit more. But yeah, it's going to depend on what happens with Matt Ryan. So it's a little bit of a wait and see for me, but the passing game's in a fantastic spot, and you have Russell Wilson as right now the leader in fantasy points per attempt.
I asked you earlier in the week on Tuesday's show where we took a first look at this slate, where do you have Russell Wilson ranked among quarterbacks? I'll ask you again today. Maybe things have changed a little bit over the past couple of days. Where do you have Russell Wilson ranked at quarterback?
Yeah, so if I assume that Matt Ryan ends up playing, because that's where the sentiment seems to, that he doesn't need to practice and he can still play on Sunday, he would come in ranked for me as the number 3 quarterback.
Number 3? Okay, fair enough. What about Chris Carson here? His volume has been insane. Actually similar to the likes of Leonard Fournette. 22 carries against Arizona, 27 against the Rams, 24 against Cleveland, 21 against Baltimore. He's had 4 targets or more in 3 of those 4 contests. It's been really, really solid to see the type of work that he's getting. He actually doesn't have a game with fewer than 15 carries. Even in that New Orleans game where he fumbled early on, actually lost a fumble in each of his first 3 games this season, Chris Carson still saw 15 carries in all of them. It looks like he's put that behind him for now and should see another 20 carries in a game that they should win pretty easily. Let me take that back. If Matt Ryan plays and he's healthy enough, I think this game probably stays competitive based just on their offense alone. But Chris Carson really shouldn't see the game script get away from him regardless.
Yeah, and Chris Carson, so coming into this, just like where his price range suits up, I'm going to have interest in him because of that workload. Like even with Rashad Penny back and somewhat healthy, or at least suiting up last week, only played 3% of the snaps. Carson's now seeing 19.9 rushing attempts per game. It's the 3rd most on the slate, but he's priced as the 6th most expensive running back. So yeah, if Matt Ryan is out, then yeah, I like Carson a lot more because you could see just game flows tilting to where Seattle's going to be leading for most of this game if Matt Schaub has to fill in. I do like this matchup for Carson when you take into account his volume, but that's really the only reason why, because Atlanta's been a top 8 run defense on the season. And I mean, part of that's been just up front. They've been very stout, but when you take into account that how bad their passing game is, that's where you want to target them. So I like Carson as of right now. I like him more if Ryan is out.
Yeah, I think, like you just said, a lot of it is the fact that they're not a bad run defense. We've discussed it quite a bit. But also, teams really haven't needed to go ridiculously run heavy on them. Maybe later in games, sure, but you can do whatever you want in the passing game. So it's definitely a give and take situation there. But just based on the way that this offense is designed in Seattle, I honestly don't even think it's going to matter, Sal, in that they're probably just going to run regardless of what's happening. Of course, if Atlanta somehow gets out to a 21-0 lead early on, then things can certainly change. But just given what we've seen from Pete Carroll, I wouldn't be surprised to see another run-heavy performance or game plan. Seattle is averaging the 4th most rushing attempts in the league this season, and I don't think that surprises anyone.
Yeah, and Grady Jarrett in the middle of that defensive line for Atlanta, he's been like a top 3 player in the entire league against the run. He's just swallowing up everything. But when you just factor in the workload like we talked about, probably you get 22 touches more times than not from Carson here, and his team's implied for nearly 30 points. It's hard to ignore that, especially when you look at the other players around him in price.
All right. on the other side, like I said, no Mohamed Sanu. Let's go ahead and just assume that Matt Ryan's going to play.
Yeah.
If that's the case, what are your thoughts here on guys like Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley and Austin Hooper in what, again, if he plays, you're probably going to see a total around 53, 54. It will be the highest on the slate.
Yeah, so it's an interesting spot. I think I definitely have interest in Matt Ryan. Then he would creep up to one of those top 3 interests. Right now, he stands at 4, and he's going to be a guy that I get a lot of stacks just because there's pass catchers and with Sanu out, easier now to see where this is going to go. What I have the most confidence is stacks of Matt Ryan, Julio, and Ridley, or Matt Ryan, Julio, and Hooper. The problem with Ridley, and it's not really much of a problem, he should see just an elevated increase in his overall usage. It's just a matter of, do they do that right away? Sanu being gone, just running primarily out of the slot. Do they put Ridley into the slot, or do you still have Ridley on the outside and you see a mixture of Justin Hardy in the slot? Or do you see Ridley go into the slot a bunch with a guy like Russell Gage on the outside? We really won't know, and they haven't shown any indication yet. Ridley's been a primary outside receiver, so I think it leans that you see Ridley on the outside, and then what you get is Justin Hardy and a mixture of Ridley coming into the slot. If that's the case, then it's a pretty bad matchup for Ridley on the outside. If that's the case with Shaq Griffin would stay on Ridley instead of Julio just because of size advantage. Julio would have a beneficial matchup against Trey Flowers. He's the bigger cornerback, so it's just where that matchup will likely lean for most of the game. So yeah, I like Julio there. If you're playing for stacks, I like him. If you're playing for one-offs, I prefer, and we'll get to him, DeAndre Hopkins. But I lean Matt Ryan, Julio, and Hooper stacks. Hooper currently has the number 1 advantage, according to Pro Football Focus, for tight ends this week against Tedrick Thompson by a wide margin over anybody else. He has 50 pounds on him. It's a good matchup for him. And Tedrick Thompson allowing over 1 yard more than any other safety in coverage this year to tight ends per coverage snap.
Yeah, and when you're talking about ownership, from what we have right now, a little preliminary ownership, Michael Thomas, DeAndre Hopkins, Tyler Lockett, and Julio Jones are seemingly your top highest owned or projected highest owned wide receivers. It's going to be hard for me to prioritize Jones over Hopkins. In tournaments, of course, you're going to want to have some in this spot, especially given the elevated total. But DeAndre Hopkins against Oakland here with no Will Fuller is got to be a priority.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. And we'll get to that game. And I prefer that team in general as a stack. And they're probably my number 1 stack as of right now. And Hopkins over Julio in one-off spots. Yeah, Julio's the guy that I would get to. Primarily where my ownership will come from would be just stacking this Atlanta team.
Do you have any interest in Devonta Freeman?
Yeah, I think there's slight interest at the price point. I think there's a couple other guys, and it's just a weird price point at running back. And I see ownership coming in on him, so I don't think I'll get to where the public is. I'll definitely be under it. But it's just kind of this week at running back, once you start to dip below really the $7,000 range, it starts to get a little bit murky. So I understand where the ownership's coming from, especially after a couple of productive weeks. But I'm going to have, if he's coming in close to 20%, I would imagine if I was playing 20 maxes or 150, I'd have probably like 10.
Okay. Yeah, I don't even know if I'd have that much at this point. I understand that because the game should be very high scoring. But aside from that, it's going to be tough to get there at a position that offers quite a bit of value. Of course, Freeman isn't really overpriced, but we'll get to some other comparably priced guys and weigh them against each other. Let's talk about Buffalo and Philadelphia, though. First of all, the big thing here, Deshaun Jackson's been out since the start of week 2. He's still not practicing. The guy just should have had surgery. At this point, it's really, really tough. He's taking way longer than expected. And even though the Eagles, reading this, never considered placing him on injured reserve, it sounds like he probably should have been, and now it looks like he might be. And there was a lot of discussion that this abdomen injury was a sports hernia, which can hold you out for quite some time. The truth is, Sal, the Eagles' offense, without that deep threat, we saw it last season as well, has really struggled to move the ball downfield at all. Nelson Aguilar with alligator arms, even though a defender's nowhere near him. Did you see that play?
Yeah.
Horrible.
I mean, I saw your tweet about it too, and then I saw the play, and just in terms of just losing the ball too as well, in terms of tracking it, terrible.
Oh, maybe the worst ball tracker in the league. But now they go up against a very good Buffalo defense, really on all fronts. and I don't know how they're going to move the football. I guess we'll find out. But let's start with Philadelphia here. In Buffalo, their third straight road game, going up against a strong defense. What I expect here, though, Buffalo does not have a prolific passing game at all. So what you could definitely see in this game is low scoring, comes down to the final possession, because I don't know if Buffalo is going to be able to exploit the Eagles' secondary woes like other teams have. And Jalen Mills at least looked decent last week, which should help them out a bit. But Buffalo has a 23-point total, 20.5 for the Eagles, and a 43.5 over-under here. I expect this to be a pretty low-scoring affair.
Yeah, I agree. And like on the Philadelphia side, I'm not even sure there's anything I really want. I don't want Carson Wentz here on the road in Buffalo, one of the worst spots to go into. Jordan Howard, his snaps are surely coming up. Going to be a road underdog here. Again, a very difficult matchup. Bills allowing the 7th fewest rushing yards per game at 80.5. So it's 6th fewest receptions to running backs as well. So even if you wanted to see Miles Sanders as sort of a dart throw kind of at this point in a tournament, I think he's probably the one that I would even prefer, but I don't want either of these guys. To Alshon Jeffrey, so Buffalo's going to play a really tight zone defense. Jeffrey should see a lot of Tre'Davious White. Both of those are just terrible for what Jeffrey's skill sets primarily are now. He was targeted downfield finally last week a couple times, but primarily been a chain mover and a red zone body. Not going to get there. 5,200 is his price point, and there's just a lot of, and I mean, there's like probably almost double-digit wide receivers between that $4,000 and $5,500 range that I like more than Alshon Jeffrey. Zach Ertz, finally. This Buffalo defense has been, as a zone defense, you expect them to kind of funnel to slot wide receivers and tight ends, but they've been just really, really good against tight ends as well. I mean, the best one they faced is Evan Ingram. They held him to a floor game of 10 fantasy points. They only allowed one catch to Delaney Walker. Mike Gesicki's been the best tight end performance after the 10 points from Evan Ingram, and he scored only 8 fantasy points. So it's a really tough spot for Ertz. And once again, with Deshaun Jackson out, you're going to continue to see a lot of attention on Ertz. I think you can do better at tight end. And that pretty much just leaves it that this is a wash for Philly. More times than not, if a team comes into Buffalo, I probably don't get a lot of them. And there's just not a lot of pieces that I want from Philly here.
Yeah, look, I'm with you. The only thing I would point out, though, is I think that the tight end stack could be I still think they're going to be good, really, on all fronts defensively. But I think it's a bit misleading given that the tight ends they faced were, the Jets. I don't even know who they had starting in that game. Cincinnati, New England. Delaney Walker's been fine, or is a fine tight end, but Mariota had been garbage. Mike Gesicki might be showing some improvement, but he's still very far from a premier tight end. And then you had Evan Ingram, who is like the one semi-decent tight end they faced this season. And yes, they held him to 6 for 48 scoreless yards, but they faced some very, very underwhelming players at the position this year.
Yeah, I completely agree with that as well. And that's something that is like true for tight end position more than anything else in terms of like until we have even a sample of like 10 games to really go off of. So yeah, I agree with that. I think the bigger concerns are probably the defense overall and then just more attention on Ertz. And then also when you factor in just the other players at the tight end position this week that I think are going to be in better matchups. But that being said, yeah, Ertz would be the only piece that I would probably come away from this game if I had lineups with Philadelphia players.
The Eagles locker room is in utter turmoil right now too. They had the anonymous source. Everyone thinks it's Alshon Jeffrey complaining about Wentz pass selection. It's not good right now. Now they're traveling to Buffalo, so maybe they shock the world and come out and drop 30 points on them. But I'll take the wait and see approach here. Even if they were to come out and put up big numbers, I mean, really, what's the point of trying to pick whether it's Alshon or Howard or Miles Sanders or Aguilar? Like Ertz is the one guy that probably has that really nice 2 touchdown potential 100-yard upside, but you haven't seen it this season yet, and they're struggling mightily. On the other side, you've got John Brown in a pretty interesting spot, and wide receivers that can get behind the DBs have really, really crushed them. The double move against Philadelphia corners has crushed them for several years now. They bite go back and watch it anytime. They bite on these every single time. As a Philadelphia Eagles fan, it is maddening, Sal. But yeah, John Brown's probably going to see a good amount of Jalen Mills. And really, whoever else he sees doesn't matter. Like Rasul Douglas, whenever Brown's on the right side of the field, Rasul Douglas has been burned on a myriad occasions this season. Like John Brown, I think, is probably the one guy in this game that I have some interest in. What about you?
Yeah, it's just John Brown. Yeah, Jalen Mills will be slightly more difficult of a matchup, but it's not going to be like a shadow matchup. So he will see some of Douglas, which benefits Brown. Brown seeing 7.5 targets per game, getting all the air yards pretty much on this team. That's the spot that you want to go to. Philly's allowing the league high 48 DraftKings points per game to wide receivers, however much you weigh that. So yeah, I like John Brown here. The concern is like, yeah, Josh Allen's in a good spot as well. He's priced up a little bit though at 6,500 for the matchup. And I only want to go to John Brown when I'm kind of getting to a stack, and I won't do too many. I think it's fine to do just a quarterback and a wide receiver stack. I don't think it's the end of the world if you don't get another guy in there or a game stack, but I'm not going to do that often. And if I do it, it's probably not going to be with Josh Allen and Brown. Buffalo hasn't had a quarterback throw for over 300 yards in over 35 games now. So this would be the game that happens. But I'm probably not going to get too much of that. I really like Josh Allen. Like I like this matchup for him a lot. So honestly, if you wanted to run him naked, I don't think it's the end of the world either, but just based on the amount of times that actually works out, I doubt I end up doing it. So yeah, John Brown would be the one piece that I take away from this in that 5K range at wide receiver.
Yeah, I hear you. I would say though, the one issue with playing Josh Allen naked is, given what we've seen from this Philadelphia secondary, I mean, they've been on all fronts. It's been terrible. If Josh Allen gets there, he's going to use his legs. But there's also a very good chance that, either John Brown or another receiver in this game is going to have a really solid performance just based on how Philadelphia has been beat this season.
Yeah, I agree. You would literally just need like an 80+ yard rushing game and a touchdown for that to work out in your favor, which isn't out of the question, but definitely, it's definitely not the highest upside spot.
Let's move to Chicago, Soldier Field. Bears hosting the LA Chargers. I don't know how much time we're going to have to spend here, but let's just for a second break down the breakdown in defense for the Chicago Bears. Their first several weeks, I mean, that was the only reason they didn't lose every game through the first few weeks, not including Washington, of course, but they're averaging some of the fewest points offensively in the league this season. They had been on defense very much limiting opposing runners, but they've coughed up 320 yards on the ground over the past 2 games to the Saints, and the backup running back, credit Latavius Murray, he's a good backup, and Josh Jacobs got him back on track. I think, injuries haven't helped them, but a big thing is they're not taking the ball away. They're not getting the same type of turnovers that we had seen. They have 1 sack over the last 2 games. Compare that to 5 in week 1, 2 in week 2, combined 10 in weeks 3 and 4. There have been some issues defensively here, and I think a lot of it has to do with how often they're on the damn field, because Mitch Trubisky has looked terrible at quarterback.
Yeah, that what you said last is, I think, a huge reason why. So, like, the running defense is definitely missing Hicks. I mean, the last 2 games without him, it's been very poor, and he's probably one of their best run stops in the middle. That defensive line really holds it together. But that's the bigger piece, is when your defense has to be getting tired, I would imagine, of just 3 and outs or turnovers from your offense, and it's just constantly on the field in short field situations. So, yeah, I mean, they're going to regress from being the number 1 overall defense. On average, defenses drop 7 spots in the rankings the next year. That doesn't mean they're a bad defense. It's just, I think this offense is putting a lot of pressure on them. So, yeah, I mean, that does benefit this Chargers team coming in against them, because I don't see any vast improvements coming from Mitch Trubisky in a week. I guess you can have a slightly bump up in a matchup against the Chargers, who have been battling injuries all year, but I don't know how much that's really going to matter. I think it honestly continues unless Mitch in this offense get it turned around. And I think what you have to do if you're Matt Nagy is, and obviously the whole fantasy community doesn't like condoning the run, but when you have 5 rushing attempts last week and Mitch Trubisky is playing the way he is, that's a bit of a concern. I understand the matchup was terrible, but 2 rushing attempts for the rookie running back that you were very high on does not seem that smart.
Yeah, you think? It's crazy. And don't get me wrong, Montgomery has been the furthest thing from efficient.
Yeah.
But really, the defenses do not respect Mitch Trubisky, so it makes it difficult on the offense as a whole. It really weighs them down. But I do think the only question here is, have the Chargers and Phillip Rivers really been impressive enough to feel great about them. I understand that Phillip Rivers bounced back last week to some extent, threw for 329 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, and Melvin Gordon's fumble at the goal line squandered a should-be win away for a team that has now lost 3 straight games. But all in all, I just don't know how much I get to the Chargers. And the one guy that I'd throw out there is just Eckler, because it does feel like Anthony Lynn realizes, hey, I need to use this guy more, and I need to use him frequently, because we can't move the football with Melvin Gordon on the ground. And Phillip Rivers, amazingly, hasn't been able to get it to Keenan Allen either. I know he's had a couple tough matchups. I totally understand that, Sal. But you'd think that they would find creative ways to get a top receiver in the game, the football. I know I just threw a lot at you there, but kind of an odd spot when you're looking at this Chargers offense since Melvin Gordon's returned.
Yeah, I agree. It is an odd spot, and the team's probably gotten definitely a loss on Melvin Gordon. Maybe not fully his fault the whole game, but you fumbled the ball at the goal line. Definitely a loss there on that. But yeah, I think they're going to get Okun back, they're saying, for week 8 on the offensive line. They need that. They need something back on the offensive line. So that helps the running backs a little bit, but not enough to want me to be getting there for Melvin Gordon. I get it. The price tag's dropping. This Bears defense has been beaten up. So in theory, it looks like a good spot. But also, you would expect just to see more Eckler. Eckler, his routes run have not been impacted all that much, and they're still all coming out of the backfield. He only had 3 routes run in the slot last week, which, watching some of that game, I thought it was much more, but he was just coming out of the backfield, which that means that those are snaps more than likely being taken away from Gordon. I would imagine that stays the same, if not increases for Eckler. Eckler is the guy that I want in his price range, right behind Latavius Murray, and obviously if Alvin Kamara does miss, there's been some things said that Kamara should be playing, but he didn't practice yesterday. So if he does miss, then I will like Eckler in that spot. I'm going to keep going back to Keenan Allen at low ownership. I get that he has not been good. He had a very good first half last week, gets shut down in the second half. But I'll take stabs on it. I know it's a risk based on how he's been playing, but just how heavy the recency bias is coming in on him. I just don't think he's fallen off a cliff or anything. I think it's more so around the whole entire play of this offense trying to get things together. And any week we can see Keenan Allen do what he did the first three and a half weeks of the season. So I'll keep taking stabs on him as the price decreases and the ownership's low. I think that's the right time to try and be getting him right. I took stabs on it last week, worked out for a half, and then nothing happened. So far, Buster Stream this year, he's a pretty solid cornerback. 22 catches allowed, 158 yards, 2 touchdowns. So it's a matchup that Keenan Allen can win in. Mike Williams, I know a lot of people like the price tag on him. I prefer at the same tag Mohamed Sanu, and I just don't think there's enough time at points in this game to be finding Mike Williams down the field. So it's really Keenan Allen for me. Hunter Henry's okay, but I prefer to pay up at tight end a little bit this week.
Yeah, when it comes to Keenan Allen, I said the same thing last week, like that. If he's going to go completely overlooked just based on his talent alone, you have to have some interest in him. And I know you were on him, as you said too. The first half looked great, man. I thought, okay, 4 for 61, we're in business, man. Yeah. He's finally over 50 yards again. And something that you and I talked about, Logan Ryan has been playing really well, but quarterbacks are not afraid to throw at him. And I don't know how many of Allen's routes came out of the slot, but he saw 11 targets last week, which was way up from the previous few seasons. So I think they still look to get the ball to him. I just wonder, are we going to see the same results here where Phillip Rivers can't actually get him the ball?
Yeah, that's the concern, and that's like the exact risk that I'll be taking on if I roster him again. But yeah, right now at 5% ownership and the price point, I believe 6,400, just keeps coming down. I just like what that price tag more times than not, and we haven't seen it over the past month. And yeah, there have been 2 pretty bad matchups for him. More times than not, I think that's a price tag where he at least hits a median projection the majority of the time. And then, yeah, it allows him to just absolutely crush it for a ceiling at 6,400 if he finds the end zone. So yeah, I think it's a winnable matchup for him, and I'll probably get to Keenan Allen again.
Not going to argue you on that. By the way, right now we have Austin Eckler projected for less than 2% ownership. Just throwing it out there, man. At sub 2% ownership for a guy like Eckler, a running back who has literally seen a 16 target game this year, and is their best offensive piece outside of Keenan Allen in PPR formats, I think Austin Eckler definitely warrants consideration.
Yeah, I agree with that. And also it's important to point out, like, when we say we like these lower owned plays, it's not like 30% ownership to them.
Right. Not in cash games.
Yeah, exactly. Like the Keenan Allen 5% play, if you're getting 12% of him, you're very much over the field, but you're not breaking and having too much leverage on
Exactly.
him. So
Right.
that's important to point out. That's probably where I come in on a Keenan Allen if I played like the 150 mini max or something this week or in that range. The dollar contest, I did that last week, and I had plays like that. I had Keenan Allen, I think last week, yeah, right around 11%, and it was double the field on him, and I felt good about that, but didn't have too much leverage there.
For sure. It's very reasonable. And I think the same thing with Eckler. If you ended up with like 8 to 10% Eckler, hell, that might even be a little bit too much. But the thing about him, and I don't want to stay on this too long, the thing about Eckler, though, is he does have a pretty high floor, even with Melvin Gordon back.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. I mean, it's just all about what he's doing in the passing game. Yeah, if you look at his routes run, there was a week where he ran a ton of routes because they were just trailing. That was the week where outside of his 16 target week, whatever it was, he was seeing a ton of routes run because they were trailing a lot. But if you take that one out, he's pretty much averaging mid-20s in routes run, and that hasn't changed since Gordon came back. So it seems like that's his floor. And then we saw what the ceiling can be. He can just stay on the field the whole game if they need him to.
Yep. And in 3 games since Gordon's returned, Gordon's played 46% of snaps, 60%, and 53. Eckler's played 66, 45, and 59. If you're getting around 60% of snaps for Eckler and you know he's going to be involved, yeah. But you make it's a salient point. When we talk about these guys, we're trying to throw out some lesser owned, potential contrarian options that have a very high ceiling, not guys that we're running out 50% of and we like them more than, the chalkiest guy at their position, which maybe we do, but in football, it's hard to look at a very chalky player most weeks, not always, but a lot of weeks, and not see reason to roster him. So, yeah, it's a good point and needs to be stated for sure. How about Detroit and the New York Giants? This biggest news here is that Kerryon Johnson was expected to miss, quote unquote, some time, and now he's on the IR. Ty Johnson was, the flavor of the week from a waiver wire pickup perspective, and he's probably going to get the first opportunity, the first crack at being the lead back here. Run blocking has not been great. Kerryon Johnson has really, really struggled, but Ty Johnson is reasonably priced. And while New York Giants, while their run defense hasn't been that bad, the problem is their defense is so bad overall that Ty Johnson probably gets some opportunities at the goal line or in the red zone. And they probably get good field position based on the New York Giants defense struggling. Those are things to take in consideration sometimes when you're playing a bad team. They don't have to have the worst run defense as long as you're going to be put in favorable positions.
Yeah, I agree. And Ty Johnson's price is probably somewhat already reflected of this, but yeah, 4,900 is fair for it. I was going to see what the ownership is. It's still single digits, so it's not like he's the chalk and you're taking a risk on it. I think it's fine. Right now, Detroit, according to Pro Football Focus, has the best run blocking advantage against the Giants in the slate. Giants are giving up top 6 points, 6 most to running backs this year, 4th most receiving yards, 4th most rushing yards, 2nd most touchdowns. So, I mean, yeah, people are moving the ball on them and then finishing it off with rushing drives for touchdowns, whatever it might be. But Ty Johnson at his price point, yeah, I think it's fine. I want to get to it. He's the guy who saw the far majority, 60+% of the snaps once Kerryon came out last week. I get the concerns with J.D. McKissick, who's been honestly just a guy who gets cut and dropped and really a depth back. But in his career, he's been pretty solid. He's right around a 5-yard per carry type player on only 65 career carries. So, yeah, McKissick will get some work, but I think, like you said, the first crack is going to be Ty Johnson. And when he's 4,900 in a very good matchup, and he's also probably a little bit more pass catching friendly based on what we saw in the preseason and his limited snaps so far over Kerryon, I think it's actually a little bit of a boost up, at least for this individual matchup for this team and him. So, yeah, I'm fine getting to Ty Johnson. I also like this whole Detroit team for stacks, so that's going to impact how much I get to him because I'm not going to want to correlate Johnson with Stafford.
If Johnson starts to get chalky throughout the week, I'll probably back away a lot.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. If he starts to get chalky, like seeing him at 8 single-digit %, and we'll see how much it changes. I agree with that because there's some other backs that you could take stabs on right around him. I mean, Tevin Coleman being one of them at a similar price point, who at that point probably has a similar role to Ty Johnson in terms of their snap counts. So we'll see what the ownership looks like. Right now, it seems okay at 8%.
Yeah, it's funny too because you look at Football Outsiders adjusted line yards. The Detroit Lions are 14th, so they're in the top half of the league. Not special, but certainly not terrible. Not as bad as I thought. Running back yards though, they're 22nd, and there's just a couple of other areas where it looks like Kerryon Johnson may have been the issue more than the run blocking. But I guess we'll find out.
Yeah. The run blocking has been good, and that is the issue. Like not watching Kerryon Johnson every single one of his carries, but it's clearly there's a piece of it that's just his ineffectiveness so far.
Do you talk about these game stacks? Who do you like more, or who do you like most in this offense for Detroit? And do you have a lot of interest in Matt Stafford this week as well?
Yeah, right now Matt Stafford I have the second most interest in at quarterback, right ahead of Russell Wilson and behind Deshaun Watson. So yeah, the most interest. So it's the wide receivers, and I don't think you're point chasing if you play Marvin Jones. I mean, we went into depth last week at how bad these Giants cornerbacks are. I prefer Kenny Galladay if you're just choosing to stack one player or even a one-off spot. I think he's a very good play at his price point just on an individual basis. But yeah, seventh most points to wide receivers this game. And if you look at the matchups individually, based on just the height of Kenny Galladay, he's probably going to get DeAndre Baker. He's taller than Janoris Jenkins by a decent amount. DeAndre Baker this year has given up 24 receptions, 409 yards, and 3 touchdowns, 144.6 passer rating. It's one of the highest in the league, fifth most yards allowed in the league, second worst passer rating for anybody over 100 covered snaps, the worst passer rating for anybody over 150. So this is like an absolute smash matchup for Kenny Galladay. Last week only having 2 targets, one being a 2-point conversion, so really one in the field for a 21-yard reception. I think that's just fluky. I mean, he's the number one wide receiver there. 45 pass attempts is very weird to see that, but I think it just ended up being fluky. This is a great spot for him. Marvin Jones will get Janoris Jenkins, 357 yards and 3 touchdowns allowed this year. It's a matchup. It's a great matchup for both of them. That's probably one of the stacks that I'll come in with a decent amount of ownership, and I don't think you're point chasing Marvin Jones in this matchup.
I think it'd be even more appealing if Ty Johnson does start gaining ownership, and you see less of the passing game. Yeah, I don't even think we need to repeat. Well, you already hit on a lot of it, but the damage that's been done against these corners for New York this season is astronomical. Last week, the only reason we didn't see that is because Arizona didn't need to throw the football.
Yeah, exactly. Like they just ran the entire game. And like what I'm seeing right now in ownership, I really like based on just what this overall team total is for Detroit. I mean, all these guys Kenny Galladay is the only one breaking away at like 12%. Stafford's low owned as he should be for a quarterback. And then, Marvin Jones going pretty much unowned. Not a lot of people chasing him.
Yeah, I still think there will be a little point chasing there throughout. I think that ownership will increase on him a little bit coming off that 10 for 93 and 4 game because it's a very good matchup. So I think Marvin Jones will get some ownership. Of course, his salary's come up, nearly $1,000 since last week, but he's not egregiously priced. You're not paying $6,800 for him. So I expect that to be the case here, but not crazy ownership, but enough. It shouldn't really deter me. I like this spot a lot. And you know what? While the Lions aren't a crazy good team, they dropped 30 on a tough Minnesota defense. They lost to Green Bay. Sorry, cover your ears, Sal, because of the refs. And even if they did it, it was a 1-point game, right? They almost beat Kansas City. Like that game was really close. They beat the Eagles. Yeah. They beat the Chargers. They tied the Cardinals. When you look over, their games this season, they have not played that bad. So I have a decent amount of respect for the defense. A big fan of Darius Slay, and I think this could actually be a relatively tough go for Daniel Jones. What do you think we're going to get here from Jones? Ingram obviously healthy. Golden Tate has been back for a few weeks now, and it looks like Shepard probably still doesn't play. There are weapons, though. Is it enough for Daniel Jones to get through this one unscathed? Or is this like I'll play one player from the Giants to run it back with a Detroit stack?
Yeah, I'm going to run it back more with just one player of probably Saquon in spots. But even like individually, these Giants players, I don't like it. I think it's a fine matchup overall for the offense. It's just like personally right now, I don't even know if I trust Daniel Jones, like just in terms of his skill set.
I certainly don't.
Yeah, I certainly don't. And that's just at this point for DFS purposes. Obviously, we're not talking about his long-term future here. But yeah, it's not something that I want to be rostering, especially at the price tag where it is. I don't think it's too cheap or cheap enough. So yeah, like running it back with one of these players, it's also difficult there. Like, yeah, I feel good about getting to Evan Ingram if I'm trying to get a guy back in a stack. Evan Ingram on his own, though. I prefer Hooper. I prefer Waller this week. Golden Tate will be in the slot, and that's pretty much where Daniel Jones has just been eyeing up. When Shepard was there for 2 weeks, Golden Tate the last 3 weeks, he's just throwing to the slot over 8 times per game to these receivers. And what you're going to get this week is a tough matchup for Golden Tate. Coleman's the best cornerback so far this year in the slot for Detroit, better than Darius Slay. And the only time that Coleman looked bad was against Alan Lazard, who is not a slot wide receiver, but got put in the slot for like 3 snaps that one game against the Packers. And he had 2 catches there. Other than that, Coleman's looked really good. This is going to be a much better advantage for him in terms of just size and height and speed against Golden Tate. So I don't really want Golden Tate this week. He's been good, but toughest matchup he'll see yet. So then, yeah, it really comes down to Saquon Barkley. You trust his skill set. And if you're doing a stack, I feel fine coming back with Saquon. I prefer that over Evan Ingram. It's obviously expensive. It means you're choosing him over Christian McCaffrey in those types of lineups probably. But that is where I would lean. No issues getting to Ingram. I just would prefer to run it back with Saquon in that spot.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely think Jones struggles here. And the Lions don't have a premier pass rush. Actually, they rank 25th according to Pro Football Focus. So I guess the one silver lining could be that, Daniel Jones has a 61.2 passer rating under pressure this season. And this might actually be a spot where they can keep the pocket clean enough for him to get some good opportunities. And it's actually not surprising that under pressure he struggles that much, given that he's a rookie. But his passer rating with a clean pocket is 85. It's not spectacular by any stretch, but 61 is pretty terrible. And adjusted completion percentage, 72% with a clean pocket. That's also not great. But just given the contrast between under pressure and with a clean pocket, it seems like if you put this guy under any pressure, he's going to struggle as a rookie.
Yeah, that's what it seems like. And yeah, like you said, it's somewhat to be expected. I mean, we saw it and we have seen it. Same thing with Kyler Murray so far this year, especially the first 2-3 weeks of the season. Murray just has way more upside in terms of on the ground. So that was kind of his escape route, whereas Jones has been, just bad passes and turnovers. And fumbles is the big thing right now.
My God, Luke Falk had a 12 passer rating of 12 when under pressure.
Wow.
That's crazy, dude. Baker Mayfield, 24.
Yeah, no, that's bad too. Now, I mean, he doesn't get anything better this week going into Foxborough.
No, he doesn't. All right, anything else from this one? I think we touched on it all. You know what? Do this for me. Real quick take on Saquon Barkley on a week where we have McCaffrey up top, pretty much almost identically priced.
Yeah, I prefer McCaffrey, and he's coming off a bye, and McCaffrey's just overall workload you could feel a little bit more positive about. Look, the 49ers defense has been really good, but against the run, they're not a great run defense. They've just been up on teams by 2 to 3 scores. Right now, they have the second fewest rushing attempts against them. The fewest is the New England Patriots. So teams that are just dominating and getting ahead in games. So on a per touch basis, running backs have been doing well against the 49ers. And now you have probably the best running back for DFS coming in McCaffrey. So for just a slight bump up, I will prefer McCaffrey. The reason I stated Saquon was really just running it back in the stack. He's the guy I think has the biggest 30-point upside type of thing to win you a tournament.
I hear you. Yeah, and McCaffrey coming off a bye to get fresh. That's nice. I don't think they limit his work all that much, if at all. Jacksonville, New York Jets. Leonard Fournette, Le'Veon Bell. I mentioned to you earlier this week, and I'm still there, that Fournette is not going to be a top or a preferred option of mine. That doesn't mean I don't like him. It just means I like a lot of other options at the position. Right now we have him as the second highest projected running back, fourth highest player on the entire slate. You're talking about 21.4%. And his prices come up. I still think it's very reasonable given his volume, but the New York Jets defense, and I'll say similarly to talking about the Ty Johnson and Detroit's offense, the Jets defense is going to be put in very unfavorable situations where the Jacksonville Jaguars start at New York's 20-yard line. I totally understand that. But if Fournette is going to be this popular, I know he's played well. I know his workload is insane, but I think I can get similar opportunities with other guys at cheaper price points. One of them actually is Bell, and maybe it's a huge mistake. If it is, we'll certainly find out sooner than later. But this is a get right spot for Bell. He's not very high owned right now. And I think Darnold bounces back, man. I know he said he was seeing ghosts, but I think he bounces back. New England has been New England's been a ridiculous team. If they haven't, did you know if they didn't score any points on offense this season, they'd be 3-3 still.
Whew. What is that like? Somebody took all this stuff out. Wow.
Yeah, I mean it's
The
crazy.
amount of points that they're scoring on defense. That's insane.
Yeah, it's crazy. So I do think this could be a get right spot for Bell. I said to Chris Spags yesterday, the thing I love about him is even in these games where they don't have a chance, his legs never stop moving. He's fighting for yards on every single play. So in a game that is probably winnable against an underpowered Jacksonville offense, I think Le'Veon Bell at sub 7K on DraftKings is well worth considering. But we've said that a lot before, and it hasn't come to fruition. Jacksonville Jaguars are allowing one of the highest yards per attempt on the season. They are ranked towards the bottom of the league in Football Outsiders run DVOA. There are reasons to believe that Bell could get right here.
Yeah, I think that this is so. Both of these running backs, yeah, they're both in spots where like we'll get to Todd Gurley. I think I want Todd Gurley more than them, believe it or not. Here,
I get it.
Yeah, so
risky.
I think
he's risky, but so are I think are a bunch of guys in this range. Like Bell definitely is.
Yeah, exactly. So I think right now you have a Jets defense that's getting healthier. CJ Mosley back. They probably get Henry Anderson back this weekend for their front seven. That does hurt Fournette. This Jacksonville defense or offensive line has the worst run blocking advantage on the slate. So a lot of ineffective touches potentially coming, even if he sees his normal 20-plus touches for Leonard Fournette. The upside is, like you said, you potentially have a lot of short fields, and he has 24 red zone touches. When they get in the red zone, they give him the ball. He's been stopped on the goal line 4 times this year on a 1 yard carry for a touchdown. So stopped all 4 of those times. So right here, what you're getting in Fournette is a guy that, he's in a price range of his own. I prefer Todd Gurley. I don't really get to too much of Bell right now, but the receiving game role of just seeing 2 receptions the last 2 weeks, I think it's fine. I think it's just somewhat fluky, somewhat of a small sample. He's still running very much so the same amount of routes. He's ran 25 or 28 and a half routes per game this season. And over the last 2 weeks, he's running about 25 and a half and 26 on average. So I don't really think there's any drop off there. He saw 4 targets last week, just caught one of them. So that'll bump back up, I would imagine, based on the amount of routes he's running. I don't think there's any worry there. And I think the price point is okay if you want to get to him. I probably don't get to either of them as much. I would think I get to a little bit more Fournette. But there's like a situation in this game where, and for the Jets that probably nobody's talking about, doesn't impact, well, it slightly impacts DFS, but I don't know if I'm pronouncing the name right. If it's Osemele, offensive lineman, he missed last week. I'm not sure if it's like reported on ESPN or anything because I haven't really watched, but there's an odd situation where management, he's had a shoulder injury, and pretty much what happened with him is he took an MRI, and management is what he's saying, sent just blanks to the doctor. And the report was, if you hear no news, it's good news. So he heard no news. So he thought his shoulder was fine. He's been playing through it. And now he's like, there's something wrong. So he went to a third doctor and he told him like, yeah, you need to have surgery on your shoulder. It's like really bad. So now he's filing like papers against the Jets, and the Jets are like, we're going to cut you because you're just totally lying. And he got fined for conduct detrimental to the team. It's this whole thing. It's pretty wild. I was reading about it, but yeah, pretty much what that says is he's not going to be there. That's an offensive lineman gone. So it hurts Bell a little bit. Where I come in on both these running backs is probably lower than the field on Fournette, and I'll be around the field on Bell because I think there's still upside. I don't think the passing game has just fallen off.
I think being around the field on Bell is fine. One thing I like though, and it's so crucial, Bell's playing 93% of the total snaps this season. And I don't know if he closed the game out last week because of the blowout, but yeah, 93% of snaps he played. It's been it's at least been a season where he's going to be on the field all of the time. And if that's the case, I think the passing targets start to rebound a little bit. I'd be very surprised if they didn't. They need to get him involved. But it's odd since Sam Darnold returned. Yeah, only 2 receptions for Le'Veon Bell. What are your thoughts on the passing game here? Jets passing defense really has not been bad. You've seen them hold decent passing attacks to limited numbers. I'm not including touchdowns though here because they've been put in horrible situations. But I think this is a decent enough pass defense. I don't think they're great at all by any stretch. But they rank 6th in run defense DVOA, 17th in pass defense. So right in the middle of the league. And Minshew in this offense, they're underwhelming. So I do like Shark this week. And I think you could get good numbers, but I'm not interested in pairing Minshew with 2 receivers or anything. Are you?
Yeah, no, I'm not either. Like, I know people are interested in DD Westbrook because the price point continues to really go down, but he continues to produce. He's not expected to practice today. I don't have any interest in DD this week, not because of his skill set. I've been on him like the last 3 weeks, but like that 4K range, I can name 5 guys that I want more than him at the wide receiver position, just more upside. And yeah, you mentioned it. The Jets defense, their outside cornerbacks, it's kind of like bend but don't break. But Brian Poole in the slot has been very good. The second most slot snaps. He's only averaging 3
Yep.
receptions and 21 yards per game to wide receivers. That's not good for DD if he suits up. So no interest in DD, no interest in Minshew. Shark, like you were saying, some interest. He'll probably get Jermaine Johnson on the outside, who has been very meh at best. But it's just a spot where I don't prioritize it, and I probably don't end up on any of these receivers.
Yeah, I don't find myself getting there either. Maybe that changes throughout the week, but I don't think it will. And one of the things too with DJ Shark and Westbrook is on the surface, a lot of it looks like they should be producing the same amount. But what is it? I think yards per target on. So yeah, here it is. Yards per target on DD Westbrook this season, Sal, is 7.6. Okay. Yards per target for DJ Shark, 12.4.
Yeah,
so
and
he just does more with the targets.
Exactly. And it's like the same thing if you look at air yards. DD's like 7, and I think DJ Shark is 14 air yards per target. So it's just, you're getting more upside there, even if I like DD a lot, but in this matchup, I don't want to go there. And then, yeah, somebody said that, like, just based on price point, it's DD over Shark this week. I would disagree. I mean, if you're looking at the individual team, definitely not for upside, but that 4K price range for wide receivers is where there's like 7 viable guys who have more upside.
Yep, absolutely. All right. How about we get to? Oh, actually, do you have anything in the passing game for the Jets?
Yeah, I actually think Robbie Anderson's my favorite wide receiver play in the entire game, even more than Shark a little bit. He'll face Trey Herndon probably just because of they match up with their 40 times a little bit better. And Herndon so far, he's been below average this year. He's given up 328 yards and 2 touchdowns. It's a good matchup for Robbie Anderson. You're just relying, though, like you always do. Does he catch a 60-yard or, I mean, earlier this year, 90-yard touchdown? I think it's a good matchup for him. If I get to anywhere at wide receiver in this game, it's probably Robbie Anderson.
Okay. So the LA Rams have currently on this slate and actually on the week as a whole, including Thursday night, Sunday night, Monday Night Football, the highest implied total, 30.5 points. They're 13-point favorites here in a home matchup with the Cincinnati Bengals. You talked about, or you alluded to Todd Gurley being someone you really like this week. Dude, I'm with you. I don't see any way you get away from him entirely. Bengals 5.2 yards per attempt. Amazingly, they're allowing 29 more yards per game on the ground to the next worst team, which is the Dolphins. I mean, that's crazy. They've allowed 9 rushing touchdowns. It's the second most in the league. Here's a crazy one. 20-plus yard carries, because, look, we want explosiveness. We want upside here. The Giants are second worst with 8. Cincinnati's allowed 14. So I think just repeating some of the stats we've gone over this week, only because it's so important to kind of acknowledge how bad this Cincinnati defense, run defense has been with 200-plus yards allowed in 3 straight games. They're atrocious, Sal.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's why I like Gurley. He's almost a 2-touchdown favorite here. I understand the concerns about the injury. He has another week to get like healthier if he ever will, I guess. But 61% of the snaps he had last week, he saw 19 touches. I think that's reassuring that he's going to be okay. They gave him pretty much a full workload, more than he's been seeing on average this year, which has been right around 17 opportunities per game. So getting 19 above average for what he's been seeing, I think another week just helps that out a little bit more. Malcolm Brown hasn't been practicing, whatever that might add to it. So yeah, I mean, you have a 2-touchdown favorite in Todd Gurley here at home. I like this spot for him a lot. You touched on all the stats on how bad Cincinnati has been. They're arguably, probably, if not the worst run defense in the entire league. Todd Gurley at 7,400. I probably get to more of him than Fournette this week. And that's like one of the spots when I touched at the top of the show that there's some ownership that I am like a little bit different than. And I think that I feel comfortable. I do feel comfortable with it right now. So I wouldn't be shocked if Todd Gurley is like one of my top 2 or 3 owned running backs this week.
I don't want him to be, but he'll probably be close to that. Right now, we've got ownership at 5.7%. I expect that to change. Just throwing it out there. A lot of this will change throughout the week. We'll go up, we'll go down. I think Todd Gurley's ownership definitely comes up in this game. The big thing is, even if Todd Gurley doesn't have stellar yardage totals. If he fell into the end zone 3 times from the 1 yard line, nobody would be surprised. So
Yeah, exactly. And if I see like anything, and I think you will, just full participants out of him in practice, there's no reason his snap count where it was 2 weeks ago at 90%, it can't go back up to like 80, 85%. And then you're at a range where you might get 25 touches out of Todd Gurley as this big of a favorite.
Yep. What about the passing game? Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, Brandon Cooks. Anything stand out to you here?
Yeah, Brandon Cooks stands out a lot. I think Brandon Cooks, he's my favorite play in the 5K range at wide receiver. I'm going to be the ownership on him. You don't have to come in heavily overweight right now, but usually it's always for me like Kupp is the best, then Cooks, and then whatever. But this week it's Cooks for me. He's going to be going up against just no-name cornerbacks on the outside this week. They're just really banged up. They're down to 4th and 5th string cornerbacks, this Bengals team. So yeah, they're huge favorites. So there could be a lot of running for the Rams, like we saw last week, the whole second half. But Tony McRae is probably the guy to guard Cooks because of 40 time. Tony McRae on limited snaps this season because he's a 4th stringer, has given up 11 catches on 13 targets. So like a 90% completion rate or close to it, 129 yards and a touchdown. Cooks is at home where he's a much different player when it comes to scoring touchdowns. Yeah, Cooks would be the guy, then Kupp, then Woods for me. Woods' price is a little bit up. But yeah, I really like Brandon Cooks. He's the best guy. I'm going to be getting him to the most out of the 5K range and maybe even 6K range at wide receiver.
So let me get an idea of how much you like this passing game. I obviously, we have Cooks here, who really need Cooks is the type of guy that it doesn't really matter what you've seen from him in previous games, because he only needs a couple of opportunities to break one off, make one of those huge splash plays, and now you're happy and you're forgetting all about his bad performances this season. But yeah, he's been underwhelming on the whole. It's just a perfect remedy for all of his woes when you're facing the Cincinnati Bengals at home. But as far as Cooper Kupp goes, how much interest do you have? I know he's your second favorite player on the Rams, and I would assume a lot of that also has to do with Brandon Cook's discounted price point. But you've got Hopkins up top. You've got Michael Thomas, Julio Jones, and then Cooper Kupp, all of them above 7,500 on DraftKings. Where would you rank him among those 4 players?
Yeah, so I think I would get more of, in this order, probably Hopkins and then Julio, and then I would probably get Kupp after that. I know the ownership is high on Michael Thomas, and we'll probably talk about it after, but I'm just not going to get there all that much with Patrick Peterson back right now. But what I am seeing is that Kupp at his price point is fine, like most weeks, but this week I just like what you're getting at value at wide receiver to get up at running back, in my opinion. And then you have Jared Goff's price coming up a little bit to once I start getting to Jared Goff lineups, I'm just liking just paying up a little bit more and getting to just full on stacks with DeAndre Hopkins and Deshaun Watson and then the Russell Wilson area. So yeah, I'm not getting a lot of Jared Goff, which leads me to only get more so than not one-offs from this game. So I get a good amount of Todd Gurley and then Brandon Cooks come in around the field, maybe a little bit under on Cook, and then really not much Woods.
All right. How about Cincinnati? Joe Mixon coming off a stellar 10-yard or 2-yard 10-carry performance. I was willing to look to Mixon at times because he was so cheap, and he's even cheaper this week. But it's not something I can justify anymore, Sal. I wish I could, but the Bengals are dead last in adjusted line yards. They are, in running back yards, they are dead last. It is truly, no team has been stuffed at the line of scrimmage or behind the line of scrimmage more than the Cincinnati Bengals this season. Their offensive line in terms of pass blocking has been terrible. There's no silver lining here. The question is, and wait, let me just yes or no. If it's a no, I'll let you continue. But do you have interest in Joe Mixon?
No.
Okay. Because I don't want to take too much time up on it. Alex Erickson last week ended up seeing a lot of opportunities, but he's also going up against a pretty solid, pretty talented secondary. He played 94% of the snaps, right around the same as Tyler Boyd and Auden Tate. But I just don't know if there's any way that Andy Dalton is going to be able to stay upright here. The Rams have the 3rd best pass rush in the league. They're probably going to make life miserable for him. He might quit playing football altogether at halftime.
Yeah, I'm not going to I know Alex Erickson had a really good game, and like credit to him the last 2 weeks, he's been playing really well, really just, outshining some of those other wide receivers and Tyler Boyd out there. But at the end of the day, I'm not getting to Cincinnati stacks here at all. I don't really want to do that. And then trying to have Alex Harrison as a one-off option. I mean, he's cheap, but AJ Brown has way more upside in a good matchup for $400 more. Corey Davis, $700. Like, I'm just not going to get there in tournaments. If you want to play him in cash because you need that extra couple $100 to get up to Saquon or McCaffrey, I think it's okay. I think it is thin. But yeah, I'm not going to be chasing that in tournaments. I don't really see a way that it just makes sense for me. And Mixon, no real interest there. He's not even running routes right now, and that's just a concern if they're going to be trailing. This offense just doesn't look great. Like, you have now Jalen Ramsey there, who should be following Auden Tate for a good amount of the time. And when Tyler Boyd's not in the slot, you'll have Jalen Ramsey for like a third to half of that game on Tyler Boyd. Boyd going into the slot will face Robbie Coleman, who's been one of the better slot cornerbacks in the league. It's just an overall bad spot for Cincy. And in most weeks, and Tyler Boyd being this cheap, I think it's fine to get some of him, but it's not a good matchup wherever he'll be on the field. Most weeks I like to get to Tyler Boyd, especially that price tag. This week, I'm going to go to other options over him.
Okay. Yeah, the Rams have a 17.5 implied total. Maybe the only silver lining, if there was one, is that they'll be playing from behind and they'll have to throw a lot. But we saw it against Pittsburgh. If you can't keep your quarterback on his feet, it doesn't matter how far behind you are and how much you have to throw. The ball still needs to come out of your hand and not go backwards. So I think it's a serious concern there. Really like the Rams. With the Bengals, you'll probably want to run it back with someone if you're full out stacking them. But I think that's one of the reasons I like Gurley so much, is I won't have to overload on the Rams and run it back. And, this could be a Todd Gurley featured game, and nobody would be shocked by that at all.
Yeah, I agree. And that's where I stand too, like a 2-touchdown favorite pretty much for a running back in the best matchup on the slate. And he just got a full load last week, but he's still going to be low on because people are concerned about injury. And I think that's a spot we can get an edge on.
All right. New Orleans Saints, Arizona Cardinals. It's still somewhat uncertain what Drew Brees' status is. The Saints are to have a 29.5 implied total. Cardinals below 20 and 19, 48.5 over under, and the Saints are 10.5 point double-digit favorites at home. So here we have it. Drew Brees, limited in practice yesterday, said that we're getting there. Him playing is the plan, but there's still some uncertainty there. And then Alvin Kamara didn't practice, got that ankle/knee thing going on. In a game where they're 10.5 point favorites, I wouldn't be surprised if Kamara doesn't play. Drew Brees seems like he really wants to play. Hell, he might make that decision for himself. But I don't know if Alvin Kamara plays here. And if he doesn't, it looks like, Latavius Murray is going to be back in the mix for the second straight week.
Yeah, if Alvin Kamara doesn't play, and yeah, I know Drew Brees is pushing to play, but I don't think he should, especially the same reasoning there. 10-point favorite. I don't know how much they need him in, but we'll see what his health looks like. I don't know if it changes much for me in this game anyways. Yeah, if Kamara doesn't play, that changes a lot. It makes Latavius Murray one of the guys who probably becomes a priority. Kamara, for me at least, Kamara's ownership's up right now, which makes sense because it is a beneficial matchup and his price tag is lower, but track the health there. If Kamara's out, I do like Latavius Murray. But then outside of that, not much from the Saints. I know that Michael Thomas, I think he's the highest owned player. And I said this last week, going into last week, he's the most consistent wide receiver in the league so far this year. And maybe even dating back to like when he's come into the league for that matter. He's been very consistent week in and week out. And it's because he doesn't rely on deep passing. He can get it done at any part of the field. And yeah, I just think that this matchup, he's going to see a lot of Patrick Peterson, who when Michael Thomas is in the slot for a third of the game or so, won't see Patrick Peterson. But I would imagine that Peterson follows him around. And yeah, Peterson is maybe a little bit rusty or aging, but at that same time, he's one of the better cornerbacks. And when you have a top dollar wide receiver at top ownership, I already didn't have interest, but now with the ownership being high, it doesn't really make me get excited all that much. So I guess that's like the spot. Seeing Michael Thomas as the highest owned guy is what's confusing me a little bit, especially with, Hopkins in his spot on this slate.
Yeah. It might just be with Alvin Kamara expected to be out, Michael Thomas is just going to get a massive workload again.
Yeah.
That could be it. The guy has seen double-digit targets in 5 of 7 games this season. Like you said, he just racks up yardage without having to rely on the deep ball. And in PPR formats, it's so valuable. So I get why he would be popular, but ahead of DeAndre Hopkins surprises me. And that could change throughout the week. Latavius Murray, would you put him if Kamara's out? Would you put him as one of your top running back options at his price?
Yeah, at his price, I would. And I mean, we saw what his role was last week. He'll be involved in the receiving game and a lot on the ground. So, and there's nobody else behind him. So, yeah, at that price point, he would probably end up being like a top 3 exposed guy for me.
Arizona's a tough one here. Larry Fitzgerald let me down in a big way last week. One reception for 12 yards. They didn't need the passing game at all. Kyler Murray threw for only 104 yards in this one, and Chase Edmonds did all of the heavy lifting. Well, David Johnson, by the way, does he still not have, let me refresh this. Does he have an injury designation? Because he didn't earlier in the week. He has to, right? Yeah.
Yeah, he didn't practice on Wednesday. I know
Yeah,
that.
he didn't practice yesterday. It seems like there's a good chance that he's not going to be on the field this week. But Chase Edmonds' price has come up north of $6,000. What are your thoughts on this Arizona offense?
Yeah, that's the issue. Starting at running back, a little bit foggy right now, but they did sign, I think, Alfred Morris and Zach Zenner, I believe. But so what do you get there is just, it seems like they're preparing for, like some people speculating, oh, David Johnson's gone on IR. Well, we'll see what's happening there. It seems like he might miss this week again. And if that happens, yeah, Chase Edmonds' price is up for the spot where you have the worst or the second worst run blocking advantage on the main slate for a running back and an offensive line against the Saints, who have been really good. So what you're expecting there is you're going to be down a lot, and you just hope Chase Edmonds gets going in the receiving game. And we know that that's a little bit maybe not suspect, but we haven't seen that all as much as his usage on the ground. So I'd be concerned trying to trust Chase Edmonds in this spot, but I think you can get there because it's a slate where below that 7K, like you said, there's some value, but nothing that's too secure unless Murray opens up. So yeah, running back is not something where I'm getting all that much right now in Arizona. And I was higher on Tuesday when we did this on Kyler Murray, but getting into it, like if Christian Kirk doesn't play, no interest at all in this offense, in my opinion. Kyler Murray, if you want to get there in cash, okay. But if Christian Kirk does play, I like the price tag on him. He is not seeing all that many just targets down the field so far this year. He's being targeted in very short distances. So that concerns you for just the upside, especially with the 4K range loaded. But if Christian Kirk plays, I'll like him. If Christian Kirk doesn't play, it does impact this offense. They run a lot less 4 wide receiver and even 3 wide receiver sets. Larry Fitzgerald's only been on the field 74% of the snaps the last 2 weeks. He was on the field like 95 around there, 95% for the previous weeks before that, especially when Kirk was out there. So they've been playing with the lead, which has been masking it up a little bit, I think. And Chase Edmonds was a big reason why last week. But I think this passing game is a big concern if Kirk's not out there. They just can't do what they want to do. So if he's in, I'll play him. But I don't really want stacks here.
Right. That interestingly though, Chase Edmonds played 94% of the snaps last week. Like you said, they did sign Alfred Morris and Zach Zenner, so they have some reinforcements there. But man, you have to think, and look, I have a lot of respect for the Saints defense, and I'd probably just end up going Latavius Murray at a cheaper price point in a better spot as a 10.5 point favorite. But I still think that Edmonds gets the lion's share of opportunities in this backfield here, and it probably won't even be close. But yeah, I don't think it's really a necessary play there, so I'd probably stay away from it and just go Murray because I don't expect Kamara to play either. Tennessee and Tampa Bay. Jameis Winston going up against this Tennessee secondary, and of course Ryan Tannehill against the Tampa Bay team that has really struggled. Unsurprisingly, we knew this would happen, that this would be one of the weaker pass defenses in the league. But what's pretty amazing is Football Outsiders has them ranked first in run defense this season. They have really been good at stymieing opposing running backs. It looks like a good thing on the surface for Tannehill, and I'll probably still have some interest there. But it's going to be interesting to see if they can't move the ball at all on the ground with Derrick Henry, who relies on those 6-7 yard, 5-6-7 yard carries to keep the chains moving. Will Ryan Tannehill be able to shoulder the load here against Tampa Bay at home?
Yeah, that's the biggest concern is if he has to throw 40 times instead of in the 20s, what happens? And I think you do start to see some just leaks on Ryan Tannehill's skill set once again. I do like it because of the price point. I know people are getting somewhat excited a little bit about playing Tennessee stacks in this matchup. I actually think it's fine if you're going to have low ownership to it. I like Corey Davis. I like A.J. Brown in their respective matchups here. And then Ryan Tannehill is a cheap price point. That being said, it's like a sixth in terms of like a priority in stacks this week for me, 5th or 6th. I even like Tampa Bay a little bit more on the other side. It's like a contrarian stack. I know it's a somewhat difficult matchup against this secondary that plays a lot of zone, Logan Ryan in the slot. But coming off a bye, Chris Godwin against Logan Ryan, This is a different type of slot receiver that Logan Ryan will face. The majority of the slot receivers Logan Ryan has had a size advantage on. Chris Godwin has over 15 pounds and a couple inches on Logan Ryan. So I do like this matchup for Godwin. And on the outside, Mike Evans is going to have a really good matchup for primarily parts of this game, probably with Malcolm Butler, who's just been, once again, back-to-back years now, very bad. It just seems like the Patriots know exactly when to get rid of players. But 29 receptions, 375 yards, and 3 touchdowns so far given up by Butler, 106 passer rating. It's a good spot for Mike Evans. It's a good spot for Godwin, in my opinion, when you take into account the size advantage. So what that leads me to is getting to some contrarian-type stacks of that Tampa Bay offense. So that's what I'm doing with Tampa Bay. It's just those 2 wide receivers leads me to get to a little of Winston. Tennessee, I mean, I like both of those wide receivers. It seems almost like it's almost too contrarian because there's no ownership going to A.J. Brown and Corey Davis. But I like if you don't get to a Tennessee stack, which I doubt you get to much. I really like individually Corey Davis and A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown's matchup against Hargraves is just so good. Hargraves has given up over 450 yards in the air so far this year.
If ownership stays as low as it is on these guys, these could be 2 of the, not together because again, I'm not in love with Tannehill, but 2 of my higher owned value plays. If we see them coming in this low, you don't need to have a stellar passing defense or passing game. If you're going up against Tampa Bay, the opportunities will be there. And I think that Tannehill is not a downgrade from Marcus Mariota. Maybe it's a lateral move. That's possible, but it's certainly not a big downgrade here. And we saw that last week. He eclipsed 300 yards. Tampa Bay, 304 passing yards allowed per game. It's just been really bad. They've allowed 11 passing touchdowns, and in large part have not been able to plug up any of the leaks that we've seen. Also, they're allowing 41.7 attempts per game. That's the most in the league. And it's clearly because they have become maybe the most pass funnel defense in football this year.
Yeah, I agree. I think they definitely have them. And then it's like the Falcons right after them in that range. But yeah, both of these wide receivers coming in at like 2% ownership, and they're both have size advantages, speed advantages. Like they're both in fantastic spots in their matchups. I think I prefer A.J. Brown a little bit more, but it's like you're splitting hairs at that point. Same price point, same team, same matchup, all that same stuff. So yeah, I like both of them. I agree. If you have like 6-8%, you're multiples of the field and you sit in a nice spot if one of them has a big game.
All right, let's speed this up a little. We've got the Showdown show with Alex Baker and Ben Rosser coming up after us at 12:30. Indianapolis, Denver. No more Emmanuel Sanders. Let's just out of the gate start with Cortland Sutton. What do you expect to see from him here now that he's the clear-cut number 1 wide receiver option in Denver?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if much changes. Like, it's not a role change for him. Maybe he sees an extra target per game, which is surely good for him. But Indy's zone defense, I'm not going to end up getting there. I like the cheaper range wide receivers, and I like Brandon Cooks in the same range. I think he's been fantastic. He's been like one of the quietest second-year wide receivers that we've seen in a while and having a really good season. But Sanders being shipped out, I don't think it affects his role all that much. I don't think he'll come off like the left side of the field, maybe sees an extra target, but nothing really changes in my priorities for him.
Okay. What do you like in this game, if anything?
Yeah, I mean, on the Denver side, really nothing. I know people will get all gung-ho about Deshaun Hamilton, and his price point is surely okay, but once again, like he's not seeing a role change. Like last year, you saw the role change. He came in the slot for Sanders when he got hurt because Tim Patrick was on the outside. The guy who's going to see the role change is a guy named Fred Brown on the outside. So he's minimum priced. I'd rather play Fred Brown than Deshaun Hamilton, but I'm not going to play either of them. So like the idea that Hamilton's just now this next best receiver, he's just going to stay as a slot wide receiver. So nothing really there. I really like Phillip Lindsay just as a player, but they're just splitting the load too much. It's pretty much down the middle. Lindsay's seeing an extra 2 opportunities per game, but less overall snaps. So nothing from Denver. On the Indy side, it's going to be a tough matchup for T.Y. Hilton. Might draw a shadow. Chris Harris Jr. in shadow matchups, 2 receptions for 13 yards to Allen Robinson, 2 receptions to 36 yards to Devontae Adams. And it's very hard to shut down both of those receivers. It's a scary spot for T.Y. Hilton. Chris Harris has already been saying that if he's going, he does not want to be traded. He said, I don't want to be traded because I want to face T.Y. Hilton this upcoming week. So, well, he actually is getting up for the spot. Marlon Mack then becomes an interesting play. I'm at the $6,100 price range. He's sort of like a maybe for me, but Denver's run defense, I actually respect. The Fournette game was the outlier. Outside of that, they've been like the number 1 rated right now in Pro Football Focus run defense, which is somewhat surprising to me. But if you take away that one game, I think it's true.
All right. Do you want to get to anything else here, or should we move to San Francisco, where Emmanuel Sanders will be suiting up this week?
Yeah, let's go there. Yeah, nothing from that game really stands out for any exposures for me.
I mean, actually, a lot of these games to close out this slate aren't huge. huge targets for me. San Francisco and Carolina. There's Christian McCaffrey. But aside from that, I have a lot of respect for both defenses here. I don't see myself looking to go heavy at all on the 49ers passing game. Similarly, I don't see myself getting to a lot from this Carolina passing game. I don't know. It feels like a Christian McCaffrey spot for me, and the rest is kind of underwhelming.
Yep, I agree. It's Christian McCaffrey for, the reasons we talked about earlier. This defense has been good against the run. It shows up as not giving up a lot of yards and things like that. But the second fewest rush attempts against them because they're just up by 2 or 3 scores every single game, primarily because of their defense and running game milking out some of these clocks. So I like Christian McCaffrey. If you want to pay up for him, I prefer him over Saquon. Yeah, DJ Moore, Curtis Samuel, just brutal matchups. Sherman so far this year only allowing 22 yards per game and mostly filling in for a 4th game now for Witherspoon, only allowing 15 yards per game on the air and man coverage. So just brutal spots for DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel. And then the pass rush for the 49ers should not make Kyle Allen look all that great. So only Christian McCaffrey in Carolina. San Fran side, yeah, Emmanuel Sanders might be a little bit of like a little bump to his ownership just because he got moved. I don't really have too much interest. The price tag's nice, but again, they're rotating through 9 guys who are playing at least 15% of the snaps across tight end.
Yeah, no thanks.
Yeah, and running back. So no thanks for that. You're lucky if you get probably 5 targets out of Sanders here, but he'll play in the middle of the field. He'll be the slot receiver. That's good, but George Kittle owns the middle of the field in Jimmy G's eyes. So with that said, no real interest. Tevin Coleman, the only thing from this game aside from McCaffrey that stands out as sort of maybe a pivot if Ty Johnson's ownership comes up.
All right. So I guess we're on the same page here then.
Yeah, that's the way it stands out for me. It's just a really tough matchup for Carolina, and San Fran just has too many moving pieces. Obviously Kittle's great if you want to play him, but I think you're paying up for similar value in production as you get for like $1,000 cheaper.
All right. There really isn't a whole lot that stands out in this game. If we wanted to sit here and kind of waste time trying to discuss options that might be in place, sure, but it doesn't do anybody good when we're like, oh, well, this guy could be okay and this guy could be okay, when we're just trying to cover all of our bases and make it sound good. If, Dante Pettis ends up having a good game, even though we don't really have any significant interest at all.
Yeah, I agree. And like Brian Burns is a guy in Carolina to watch out for. He's been very good this season. If he's out dealing with an injury, that opens up some things, but then that probably just opens up Kittle a little bit more for me, or makes me feel more confident if I'm already playing him.
Houston and Oakland, DeAndre Hopkins, we've already alluded to this several times throughout the show. With Will Fuller sidelined, this is a spot that's going to make. I would have put it this way: I would have liked Hopkins regardless. I think this is going to be a spot that he can really exploit. We just saw Aaron Rodgers carve them to pieces with a banged up wide receiver core and Devontae Adams being out. It's hard to believe that he doesn't end up having a really good game. I don't know if it's going to be Trayvon Mullen on him or who it's going to be. I don't really think it matters, Sal, whether it's Mullen or whether it's Worley. What I do know is that Kenny Stills is probably in play as well, and Deshaun Watson's one of my favorite quarterbacks on the week.
Yeah, right now Deshaun Watson is my number 1 quarterback, and this is probably my favorite team to stack. And then running it back, you have a clear option with Darren Waller. So yeah, Deshaun Watson, number 1 quarterback in the week, just a fantastic matchup. 20.5 team total, 2nd most points per attempt behind Russell Wilson, and he has the rushing upside that we like. So all those check boxes for me. Yeah, DeAndre Hopkins, no Will Fuller. He's my number 1 wide receiver pay-up option, number 1 guy to stack Watson with, which would be pretty obvious. He's seeing 9.7 targets per week, and it's really hard with no Will Fuller for me to think that he doesn't see like a projection, honestly, of like 11 targets this week. He's probably going to face, like you said, either Worley or Trayvon Mullen. Both of these guys are terrible. Like Oakland just shipped out their best cornerback, who wasn't great, Conley, to Houston, but it was the best thing they had. And just in time for DeAndre Hopkins to show up. I then prefer Kenny Stills on the outside, who will face either the other end of that. We'll just call it Worley for now, who's given up 265 yards and 2 touchdowns this year. And if there's anything, if anybody believes in like speed and these differences between 40 times, Kenny Stills is a 4.38. He ran his 40. Some injuries, sure, but Worley has a 4.64. So this is a really good spot in terms of just getting behind this defense. I like Kenny Stills, Hopkins, and Watkins stacks. I think Kiki has a great matchup in the slot against Joyner as well. It's just a matter of upside. Like Kiki's 6 targets are going to be for like 7 yards on average, where Kenny Stills will be in the double digits. So that's where I'm at. I think you can make the case that, but Carlos Hyde can have a good game. And I think he can, but we can do that in a lot of other spots. And I'm just going to leverage it that it's the passing game like the Packers last week that kind of takes advantage of this week's secondary.
Yep. And look, the Houston Texans will be popular. Yep. That's fine. I'm actually okay with that. I really don't have an issue. I think that there's going to be enough to go around. I don't think I'll be heavily targeting the run game. Like you said, Carlos Hyde could end up having very solid numbers. They're 7-point favorites at home. But the way I see it is the ceiling is higher in the passing game with Will Fuller out. I mean, the targets should be pretty concentrated, which is why ownership will be up. But the chances for Deshaun Watson and Hopkins and Stills to all put up very solid numbers is pretty high. And that doesn't mean that Hyde can't, get 80 yards and a touchdown too. They have a 29.3 implied total on this slate, which is second highest, or third highest behind only the Rams and the Saints, and tied with the Patriots. There's a lot to like here. I don't think just because you like one facet of the game means that you shouldn't love the other one. Now, anything for Oakland stand out to you? Tyrell Williams is questionable to play again. He actually got a limited practice in. Darren Waller's been a stud, finally got into the end zone not once but twice last week, 126 yards and 2 scores. And Josh Jacobs, questionable in this game, but dealing with a sore shoulder. You would think that he plays, but I don't know right now.
Yeah, so it's Darren Waller. We'll watch Tyrell Williams' status. Even if Williams plays, that's a scary injury for wide receivers and really affects him for the entire season at that point, any sort of foot injury that's serious. So it's mainly just Darren Waller, which I think he has. It seems like a tough matchup, but individually for himself, when you take into account his size, skill set, it's the second best individual matchup for a tight end on the slate. And he'll get Gibson, who right now is gimpy. We'll see if he actually plays their safety, Tashawn Gibson, for Houston here. So Waller's just like a number 2 tight end overall. Clear run back option. Josh Jacobs, he had to get shot up in the arm or in the shoulder against the Packers, and now apparently it's very sore, so we'll see what that does. He's been good as an underdog against the Bears, against the Packers. He's been producing. They keep feeding Josh Jacobs, but that can only last so long. You can't be a 7-point underdog and just continue to go for 120 yards. Eventually, it's going to be a complete blowout, and you might not have that opportunity. So I like Jacobs slightly this week. If guys like Latavius Murray don't open up and you're in that 5-6K range, we'll see what his status looks like. But yeah, pretty much just Darren Waller. Second tight end interest behind Austin Hooper for me this week.
Okay. Last one here. Let's get it done, man. New England, Cleveland. Oh, man, Baker Mayfield. This is not a good spot to return to your rookie season form. It really isn't. The Patriots defense has been absurdly good. Now, they've played a lot of really bad teams and really bad quarterbacks, but that isn't to say that, look, if you hold bad teams to 0 points, you're still really good. And this game's got a 45.5 total. Patriots are 13-point favorites here at home. Look, I'm not even sure what to make of this. Josh Gordon placed on the IR. He's done with the Patriots. Mohamed Sanu was traded from the Atlanta Falcons. Sonny Michel, I tweeted this the other day. Yards after contact per attempt, Sonny Michel has been so bad that there's only one player who's been worse than him this season in that category. He's getting in the end zone, though, which makes him appealing to some people. But if you don't get a touchdown with Sonny Michel, you have nothing.
Yeah, so I agree. So the New England side of this, Josh Gordon on IR. The running back situation, I slightly lean Sonny Michel just because of, the huge 13-point favorite here at home over a guy like James White. White, surprisingly, leading the entire league in running backs targets per game, more than McCaffrey. Really interesting stat. I mean, it's slightly. It
doesn't feel like it, though. It doesn't feel like every week he's getting that many targets, but it's just been really consistent, 8, 9 a game.
Yeah, exactly. He has 7.8 or 7.9. McCaffrey's at 7.5. So he's getting a ton of work there. He's just not on the field enough. But in a game like this, you can get there if you want. I think there's better options at running back. Instead of going to these guys, I lean Michel over either of them. If I had to pick a spot there right now, Michel, that's the thing. You touched on it. Red zone touches for him. He leads the slate with Fournette at 24. So he's the guy in the red zone. I know the week before they gave a carry to Brandon Bolden and he scores a touchdown. Everybody goes crazy, but Michel's their goal line back. I actually like Mohamed Sanu at $4,000. I think you start to see like a different sort of Mohamed Sanu. He's been somehow a slot wide receiver at his weight of 260 pounds or 250 pounds out of the slot. I think he moves to the outside with Philip Dorsett. You see Edelman in the slot. That's where Edelman thrives the most. At $4,000, I like Sanu here, even as a big favorite. They have a high team total. They have to get points somewhere. I think it's a nice price point. If he indeed suits up, he'll probably get TJ Carey, who he's going to have just a weight advantage of like 30 pounds on. And TJ Carey's given up 3 touchdowns, almost 400 yards. But that's about it. I don't want to pay the price tag for Julian Edelman. And on the Cleveland side, just no interest. Like I know the price tag comes down for Odell here, but I'd rather go to Kenny Galladay. It's not nearly as bad of a matchup. It's a really good matchup for Galladay at the same price point. Nick Chubb, I understand like he'll be unowned. Nick Chubb's gone off when he's unowned. It's a really good contrarian play. I don't think it is as a 13-point underdog going into Foxborough this week, where your offensive line has not been great and your offense can't move the ball. And then Jarvis Landry's in a price range where there's like 8 to 10 other wide receivers that are in better spots. So yeah, it's just a game that New England's defense should dominate once again. And Mohamed Sanu stands out. And if you want to get to Sony Michel, I'll say it's okay in the price range, but not a priority.
Nick Chubb, look, could it be one of those spots that burns everyone who faded him? I guess it's possible. And he's probably still going to see plenty of opportunities because they've continued to run him even if they're playing from behind. Yeah. But is it really worth it? Especially when, look, you have to at least consider the fact that this team has a 16-point implied total. Like, what's the touchdown equity here, Sal?
Yeah, exactly. And like, even if early in the game he gets his 8 carries on the first couple of drives, if they indeed go down, and also you have to factor in that this front and defense in general is very good. So it's not like those are going to be productive carries, but a 13-point road dog going into a bottom 3 overall stadium environment is never a spot I want to get to. And maybe that's why you'd be a little bit contrarian, but I don't think it's optimal this week.
I'm with you. All right. Hey, awesemo.com/join is how you can get 50% off your first month in Awesemo Plus membership. If you haven't done it, check it out. And use the sign-up code NFL Strategy, all one word, NFL Strategy, to 50% off your first month of all access premium content, Awesemo Plus subscription. If you're not ready to do that, though, we've got a weekly pass, express pass for $3.95 a week, and so much more. On that join page, you'll see videos and tutorials for all of our tools so you know exactly what you'd be purchasing, and a quick little survey to ask you what type of player you are so we know what to cater for you, to you, so you're not getting too much that you don't need and you're not getting too little. All of that so we can make the experience much better for you as a player and as a member of awesemo.com. So check it out, awesemo.com/join. Use the sign-up code NFL Strategy. Lead us out, Sal. Where can the fellas find you?
Yeah, the fellas can find me on Twitter at SalVetriDFS, and you can find me here on the Awesemo channel on Tuesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays for NFL at 11 a.m., and then on Wednesdays at 9:30 with Josh for the NBA Wednesday strategy show. And then, I have a YouTube channel. It's just my name, Sal Vetri. You can check out more fantasy content over there.
That'll do it for us. Stick around. Alex Baker, Ben Rosser, got your Showdown slate. Full breakdown live coming up next. Minnesota Vikings, Washington Redskins tonight. See you back here tomorrow on the NFL Strategy Show, presented by Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports.